Hello, Sitaram. Good morning and welcome to another program in the series Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, Ramnaresh Dwarika, especially as well. Welcome every one of our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago, of the Caribbean, and worldwide who are following us and listening to this program on the various media platforms. And just to let you know, this program is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube and Facebook soon after the end of the program this morning. And it will also be repeated on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. So those of you who are unable to follow the program in its entirety at this point in time, you can always come back and listen to it or send a link to someone who you believe may benefit from the information given out in this program. And it can be used as a resource as well. So I want to thank those of you who are listening and to let you know this morning we are dealing with a very, very important topic. Last week we spoke about another contentious one, a difficult challenge, how to get alcoholics and drug addicts to seek help and to stop drinking and using drugs. Today, I want to speak about relapse because this is also a very highly misunderstood uh, topic, part of addiction and recovery. Because a lot of people do think that relapse is just an incident, a situation. But in this program this morning, I want to look at what leads to a relapse. What happens during a relapse? I want to, you know, break it down step by step, because most people think relapse is a sudden choice, a single choice a person makes, a bad choice they're making, or it happens in a moment. That is not so. That is the old thinking. But relapse is almost never sudden. What happens sudden sometimes, most people would like to refer to it as a slip. For instance, I am a person in recovery, for instance, and Christmas is coming up, and I might get invited to some friends or place, and a lot of people are not aware of the nature of addiction. And in our culture, we we prepare a lot of things. We even put alcohol in meat as well. Sometimes when we cook in it, wine, and we may put bitters, which contains a high percentage of alcohol, in our juices and in our drinks. And of course, we have the black cake that we really douse with alcohol to preserve it and to give it that flavor and taste. And a lot of people don't think that that is anything serious because you can't eat a piece of black cake and get drunk. And so they will offer it. And sometimes it has almost happened to me on a trip in Germany where I was given a piece of cake. And thank God my wife was with me, who is my official taster. And she tasted it first and said, "Hey, hey, don't touch that cake." And so friends and relatives may give you these things. I mean, not with any ill intent, in keeping with the trend of the season. Or a friend might pour a little drink in your glass when you go to a party. And I will do another program on how to stay sober around this time of the year. But and you take it up and you drink it by mistake. And then after you drank it, realize, wow, this thing had alcohol. Now that I would call a slip. That does not give you the right to now continue until you get drunk. If you continued, it meant that you were looking for an excuse for the longest while to go back and drink. But if you're serious about staying sober, you're starting to, to appreciate the value of a sober life, starting to recognize the benefits of being sober, then even though you may have a slip by accident like that, that is not, I would not consider that a relapse. So this morning, as we discussed, you will become more and more aware of what really is a relapse, because the relapse is almost as I said, never sudden. It is a process. In the past, I've used an analogy. For instance, if a relapse is like being in Port of Spain and staying sober is being in Chaguanas, where I am, then if you see signboards telling you, well, look, you're heading out of Chaguanas, and you see a signboard marked Weimar Village, you know you're heading in the direction of Port of Spain. Then you will see Grand Bazaar, you will see Aranjuez, and eventually you will see a lot of signs before you actually reach the Port of Spain. That is, you actually take the drink. So I wanted today point out some of those signs that you can see. And if one is able to do this, you can actually stop the relapse long before it happens. The gradual shift to a relapse begins very, very quietly. It may take days, it may take weeks, it may even take months before a person uses again. But the process has started. And understanding this process can actually save lives, especially yours if you are a person in recovery. And today we are going to really look at it, step by step, as I said. So let's begin with the simple truth. The old model says relapse happens at the moment of use. A lot of people believe when you drink, well, you did it. However, the new model says relapse begins long before that moment. It starts emotionally, and then it moves into the mind, mentally, and then the last thing is it ends physically. That's when you actually pick up the glass and take the drink. So when we understand this, we can predict a relapse. You can watch a guy, if you're paying attention, somebody in your family or your group, and you can see long before if you're paying attention, and you can actually predict he's heading for relapse. And that way we can interrupt the relapse and we can actually prevent it. So first stage of this in this process is usually an emotional relapse. In this stage, the person is not thinking of using, not yet, but their emotional state and behavior are drifting into danger. And let us explore that a little bit. Here are some of the signs. You start seeing the person withdrawing from people, going back to isolating again. Why? They're starting in their mind, they feel like, they're not happy because they were used to using alcohol or drugs to enhance their emotions and feel happy. And now that they're not using it, they have not yet learned how to be happy being sober. Now they're also beginning to really have to deal with problems that they would normally escape in the past by using drugs or alcohol. So that life can become very challenging and they may start to withdraw from activities, from people. The next big sign, as I said earlier on, signboard that tell you you're heading to Port of Spain, is that you start skipping meetings for almost all kind of excuse. The rain falling today. And as I say that, nowadays we don't have that excuse because you can go to meetings sitting right in your living room. You have meetings that are being run just like this program. We are doing this program using the Zoom platform. These platforms are also being used to host AA meetings where hundreds of people can attend a meeting. And there are meetings going on as we speak in various parts of the world and time zones. But once a person starts skipping meetings and making all kind of little excuses, I don't like the chairperson, I don't this, that. That is a big sign for that, hey, you are heading in the wrong direction. And then they begin to ignore routines, healthy routines, that is. They get up in the morning, they normally would have brushed their teeth, they would have got up at a certain time, they'll probably exercise, have their breakfast, get involved in doing something, go to the job. You see they start becoming sloppy and all of that. Of course, they're not sleeping well because emotionally they are disturbed. There are three major indicators for human beings: how they sleep, how they eat, and how their bodily elimination is going. Once those three indicators are within normal range, they are fairly all right. So the person who, is starting to have emotional turbulence, they will find insomnia becomes part of their experience. Then they're not eating well. They go back to eating junk, crap food, where they were taking care of themselves. At first, a person who is really, in fact, the old saying, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody. So that if you see yourself as broken down and no good, that, like when you were drinking, it's just like if you had an old car, you don't care where you park it, you don't care who lean up on it or what happens with it. But if you see yourself as valuable, and that is evidenced by taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself really indicates to others that you see yourself as valuable. And then another sign is feeling irritable for the little or no, they're getting into arguments and all of that, and they're very irritable. It means that they are now not practicing what they are learning in the recovery program. They're not putting the new coping skills that they are learning into practice. As a result, they're going back to their old form of dealing with things, getting angry and getting into quarrels and so on. And a lot of times they don't want to talk about it, bottling up their emotions. You know, just like the drinking, didn't want anybody to talk to them about it. Now, even in recovery, they haven't drank yet, but they start getting back into the same old behaviors, saying, well, look, I'm fine, even when you could see that they're not fine. And as I thought about this sign this morning, I thought about all those people, who will tell you, I tell you, I'm not angry. You've seen that they're angry, but they're saying they're not angry, you know. And this stage feels harmless. All of these things are happening. But this is where relapse truly begins. And I don't want anyone listening out there to go and pretend to be diagnosticians and so on and say, well, yeah, you're going to relapse and castigate and start a row with the person in recovery. But these are important signs to pay attention to, not to accuse or not to pronounce. So let me give you an example. Let's suppose you have this guy named John who is 9 months clean. He stopped calling his sponsor. He stopped talking about how he felt. He started isolating. His relapse has already begun. He started relapsing in his head, in his heart, I would say. And eventually, if he keeps this up, if it is not interrupted, um, eventually it will lead to the next stage. So emotional relapse is real, and it is the earliest warning sign that a person is heading back into relapse. Now let's look at the mental relapse. The second stage is mental relapse, and this is the internal tug of war. This comes usually after the emotional relapse, and this is the part of the person that wants to stay sober, and then another part want relief, want to go back to the old way, wants escape, wants to feel so-called normal in inverted commas. What was normal for that person was, whenever they get upset or challenged or stressed out, the first thing the mind goes to is, boy, if I take a drink, I can be all right. And that's where the mind goes. So here are some of the signs of mental relapse. You're thinking about using. You're not using it, but you're thinking about it. You're romanticizing the past use. And sometimes I listen to people talk about their drinking and they talk about, oh boy, that was a good time. We had such a good time. We went to the river and we cooked a duck and played music and we danced and fellas tell jokes and all of that. And they remember all the beautiful times. They don't remember how they got into accident coming back from the river. Or who was vomiting yellow and green the next morning, or couldn't go to work, or got into trouble when they get home, quarrel and all of that. So at this stage, a person is thinking, look, and you see, sometimes even people around the person, relatives, and even loved ones who do not understand this disease will tell you, well, boy, one drink will not do anything. You could take a drink. Look how long you're sober now. You have control. And the alcoholic could easily get fooled by that because inside his mind, he's thinking the same thing. I wonder, because I've stayed sober for 9 months or 2 months or 3 months, I know already, I know what they say I have to do, I know what to do, and I'm doing it. Maybe that qualifies me to take a drink. And then, one of the big symptoms, and a good friend of mine wrote to me this week who's having difficulty with his son who stays sober for long periods of time, 6 months and all of that, and then boom, he goes back and drink. And one of the reasons is, a major reason here is dishonesty. Because dishonesty is one of the symptoms of this illness. And the AA program will tell you that, no matter if you're mentally ill and all of that, even schizophrenics have been able to stay sober once they can be honest. Because when you're dishonest, especially with yourself, then it is very difficult to remain sober. Because you'll tell yourself, oh, if I take a drink, nobody will know, and I wouldn't tell anybody. Well, you know what's going to happen because the alcoholic can't stop at one drink. He may do that once or twice, maybe a day or two before, and just to prove to himself that he has control, and then all hell will break loose. He will think that I can control it now because he has stayed sober for a while. No. And then he starts lying to the family. And the little bit of trust they started to invest in him when he stopped drinking, he fritters it away in a matter of one day, in a moment. Because when a person is drinking, of course, as I said earlier on, lying is one of the symptoms. So trust becomes one of the casualties of any relationship once you are not being honest. So that a lot of times to build or rebuild that trust takes concerted effort on part of the person in recovery. So that, how many times you would have said, look, I'm going to stop and, oh, I'll do this, and then you relapsed, you went back. So sometimes even the alcoholic or the drug addict can't even trust themselves that they can give a promise or give their word and keep it. So that, some of the signs at this stage, he's checking out his old friends again, going and liming with his old partners who used to drink. No, I ain't going to drink. You go and drink Malta and sit down. That is a pretty sure sign. Because one day when he's upset, he goes to the bar to lime with them. And he don't know when his hand reach to the glass and pick it up. You know? So that checking out the old life, going back to the old bars and the old haunts and all those kinds of things is a pretty sure sign that the person is now thinking about it. It's just almost before they will take it. So it's like your mind telling you, man, look, you're strong enough now. You've stayed sober so long. You deserve to take a drink. These are all the kind of rationalizations that goes on in the person's mind. And you can handle it now. This is the danger zone. But even here, relapse can still be stopped if people paying attention, sponsors paying attention, siblings paying attention, spouses paying attention. Because with honesty, just a phone call could interrupt that relapse process. Call the person. Like those people who are in AA, for instance, you have a new man come, he's staying sober, but you listen to him when he's speaking. And if is he romanticizing about the drug? Is he now going back and liming with his old partners? Sometimes you hear it. What people have on their mind is what they talk about. And sometimes they stop coming to meeting, and there might be a good reason. I know some people, because of work and changes in shift and so on, they can't come to the meeting. But it is important for members in their support group to reach out to them and find out, because just a phone call could interrupt the process. Going to a meeting can change their whole outlook. You might listen to someone, as indeed I've heard people say, in meetings that God is really present in those meetings. And somebody is going to go up there and say what you need to hear. If you are thinking about a relapse, you may hear a person talk about how they were doing the same thing and they had relapsed. And that alone could change your mind. So you don't have to go and make the mistake. A change of environment can also interrupt it. You're having a heated argument, walk away from it, take a few deep breaths. You know, one moment of reaching out can turn everything around. And then you have the actual physical relapse. The third stage is the physical relapse. This is the act of using. You actually pick up the drink and drink it. And I have heard a lot of people say, all right, they were involved in an argument with a loved one, a sibling, a spouse. They got angry. In fact, it happened with me. I would have been about like 3 months sober, and I got into an argument at home here, and just out of anger, I said, you know what? I'm trying to stay sober. You all don't seem to appreciate what I'm trying, because to me at that time it looked like I was making a big sacrifice, and that they should, roll out the red carpet for me and show so much appreciation, and that they shouldn't quarrel with me at all. And these are the unrealistic expectations that people have in recovery. And this is why there's a lot of good literature in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, a chapter on the family afterwards, so that family members can know what to expect, what may happen with their loved one in recovery. And boy, I headed to the bar, which is not too far from me, right on the junction. And I was looking back, hoping that somebody will say, hey, don't do that. And nobody came out to tell me, well, look, don't go and drink. And, I became more angry. I said, you see, they don't care about me if I go and drink or whatever I do, or even if I die. And I went into the bar. I had stopped smoking as well at the time. And for some reason, I said, you know what? Just it looked like they want me to go back and drink. So for just to spite them, I'm not going to drink. Boy, I swear to God, God put that idea in my head. Otherwise, I would have been gone. I wouldn't have been talking to you all at this program. But these things happen. So that by the time the physical relapse happens, the process has already unfolded silently, internally, and step by step, as I said. When emotional and mental relapse go unchecked, physical relapse become almost inevitable. So that prevention is always better than cure. This is why we must stop focusing on the event and start paying attention to the process. And this is not only for the family and friends and the group members of a person in recovery, but this is more so for the person in recovery themselves to see when, I know a lot of people in AA and in recovery, they say you have to look out for what this stinking thinking. When the stinking thinking starts coming back, that that usually precedes the relapse. So what are some of these stinking thinking? You start finding fault with the members in the group. You start wanting to change things the way you want it. You have difficulty practicing the principles of the fellowship. You're reluctant to do step 4 and 5 of the program, or you're finding fault with everyone else, but you're not looking at yourself. There's a whole lot of them that experienced AA members are aware of. And this is why it is important for a person in AA in recovery, in the initial stage, to have a sponsor, because your sponsor can pick it up. From the way you discuss things with them, they already will know because they walk that road themselves. Some of them still struggling with the same issues of the egotism and all of that, the grandiosity, the resentment. Some of even the sponsors are dealing with that, and so they are aware of it. So let us look at now, why does relapse happen? Why it happens at all? Under stress, the brain looks for relief. Under isolation, the disease grew louder. You know, I've heard this said, the worst company for um, an alcoholic to keep, the worst company he could keep is his own. Because loneliness is one of those predeterminants of a relapse. Let me elaborate on that. When a person is drinking, and I can speak from personal experience here, you have a lot of friends, but your friends are people who drink. You don't have friends with people who don't drink. You engage in a lot of activities, but the activities you engage in are not religious or cultural and those things, prayers and PTA meetings and so on. Most of the activities in a person's repertoire of activities when they're drinking is the river lime and the fet match and the cook and the anything that has drinking in it, they will be engaged in that. So that when they stop, they will have to sacrifice a lot of those things, their activities and friends. And that could lead to loneliness. That could lead to loneliness. And this is why, this one of the major reasons it is important to join a support group for people in recovery. So that now you're making friends with people who are also on the same path, who are trying to stay sober. You are following a program that is going to help you to develop new coping skills so that when you're stressed out, you will know, you'll learn new habits of coping. You'll probably want to call someone and talk to them about it. You'll remove yourself from the environment. You will now, again, looking at some of what are these things that actually trigger, precipitate the relapse is isolation. Because it is said that the disease grow louder when you are alone. And as I said earlier, the worst company for alcoholic to keep is his own. Then, when sleep and nutrition collapse, the cravings intensify. When you're not sleeping well, because a lot of drugs, alcohol, and even the marijuana and all of those also have a sedative effect on a lot of people. And a lot of people would have started using it in order to be able to sleep. Now, because of stress and other things, other challenges in life, they're having difficulty to sleep now. Their mind goes back. They remember, memory is always there. That, if I take a drink, I will be able to go to sleep. And I'll just take it to go and sleep. Nobody will know. And as I say this, there are some cough syrups and all of that has they're laced with alcohol. And I know people who have been addicted to I wouldn't call the name of the cough syrups and so on, but they see it as a medicine. So no the relative or anybody don't have a problem with that. There are people who are addicted to mouthwash because they have some mouthwash that has alcohol in it. And some people actually drink perfume and all of that because of the alcohol base. So everyone in recovery, important task is to learn what are your triggers, like anger, hunger, loneliness, exhaustion. These are all triggers. And you remember the very popular mnemonic in recovery. It's called HALT, which means to stop. But the HALT, the H stands for hunger. The A stands for anger. The L stands for loneliness. And the T stands for tiredness. These are four things that the person in recovery need to pay close attention to. Because in my own case, when I was drinking and so on, I never wanted to eat because I used to say, the food will take up the wrong space. Most alcoholics, if their belly is full, it reduces the craving for alcohol. So this is why people in recovery, it's important that you need to pay attention to your nutrition and avoid staying hungry. Because when we were drinking, we also neglected our health and our, biology and so on. And we didn't take care of ourselves so that in recovery, human beings, we are bio, psycho, social, spiritual beings. So that we have to attend to the biological person in us by eating proper foods now, nutritious foods, and eating on time, avoiding anger, avoiding arguments. Because yes, when a person who has been drinking for a long time stop, they go through what is withdrawal. And withdrawal symptoms can not only be physical, like the shakes and all of that, it can also be psychological, it can be social. So that when a person is in recovery, they have a tendency to still be irritable, have a short temper because they have not yet learned coping skills, how to walk away from an argument, how to do meditation, how to ground themselves, And when I say that, actually put your foot on the ground. That actually can help relieve anxiety as well. So, when any of these are present, relapse risks rises. And these are not really weaknesses. It's biology, it's neurology, and it is part of the illness. And knowing this removes shame because alcoholism and drug addiction has been recognized as a disease. It's not a bad habit. It is a disease. It is recognized by the World Health Organization, indeed, our own Ministry of Health. So that now, if you're an alcoholic or drug addict, you can, rather than fire you from the job, they send you for treatment. However, if you keep relapsing, eventually they'll have to let you go on medical grounds. So relapse is not a moral failure, but it's really a signal. Why? Because a lot of us are really stubborn. Alcoholics and drug addicts, and I include myself in that bucket, very stubborn people. Don't tell us what to do. Let us do what we feel to do. We think we're in control. We're very stubborn, so that some of us have to, as we say in Trinidad, bounce we had to learn. Telling us, boy, don't do that, don't smoke cigarette, don't go drink rum. I would have heard that from my parents umpteen times. I knew that I shouldn't, but no, I didn't listen. I always felt I was the exception. That can't happen with me. What happened with those fellas who became a vagrant? No, I am not so stupid. Uh-huh. Well, I was director at Piparo Empowerment Center. I've seen so many professionals who ended up on the pavement, homeless, because of drinking and drug use. So now let's talk about interrupting the process. I know when we're talking about this, the time run out. So stopping it early is critical because some people, after they relapse, they themselves get discouraged. Their family get discouraged. because they would have tried so many things so many times. And I thinking of that gentleman who spoke to me, yesterday, that friend, how many times he has tried with his own son, and this boy keeps relapsing. And I know that boy is not a bad boy. I've spoken to him, you know. But sometimes, some of us be having difficulty with the level of honesty with ourselves, so that how to stop the emotional relapse before the event actually happens is we need to reach out to the person, you know talk honestly to them, have them return to meetings, even if they're drinking, still go to the meetings. Because I've heard so many people say, who goes to meetings, that a lot of times, I've heard people who were drinking and going to meetings and drank from sometimes weeks and months and still going to meetings, and eventually they stopped. They were able. So out of that, they have coined the phrase, bring your body, eventually your mind will come. And I have actually seen that happen. So returning to meetings, do something to fix the sleep. Do exercise, get your body tired, do something creative around your house, plan something, fix your eating habits, avoid isolation at this point. Don't sulk and withdraw. No. Reconnect with your support system. Call a member from your group, you know, and how to stop the mental relapse. Now, that's the emotional relapse. Challenge yourself to be honest. Tell on yourself. Tell somebody. Tell your father. Tell your friend that, look, boy, I'm feeling to take a drink. I really feeling to take a drink. If you do that, you're really not going to take it. You're not going to, because if you were going to take it, conversely, you will not tell anybody. But if you tell on yourself, that's a pretty sure sign that you're really trying to be honest there. And speak honestly. Call your sponsor. Even if you drink, still call your sponsor. Challenge your thinking. Tell yourself, well, look, you know, what's this drink going to do for me? What is going to happen? Go back and how many times I've reinvented this wheel? How many times I've been through this? If you're doing the same thing the same way, you'll get the same result. You can't do the same thing the same way and get a different result. And if the result is that you keep getting back drunk, then you have to change the way you have been doing things. Change your environment. Sometimes, the environment could be the trigger because, you know, there's a saying, if you don't want to get messed with blood, don't go hang around the butcher stall. Change your environment because you're probably in an environment that is toxic. There are some things we could actually measure now, and so hopefully in the future we'll be able to measure the stress level in the environment. But you actually feel it, the vibes, as we say, the vibes, the vibrations in this place is very negative, is very heavy. You actually feel it. If you went to a funeral, you feel the heaviness as opposed to if you went to some other activity. So finally, I want to talk about preventing physical relapse. How to prevent it? By this stage, prevention depends on earlier action that I spoke about earlier. But however, if you were not aware and you didn't do any of those things, and now it's getting to the stage where you feel you're going to pick up that drink, the sooner we intervene, the better the outcome, even if the person drank. And this is what I say to my patients that I treat, a relapse sometimes is a useful experience. It is also have the phrase that relapse is part of recovery for some people. There are some people who didn't quite get it at the first go, who didn't quite believe. There are three kinds of people in the world, I've heard. There are those who could read and listen and learn. And they're the smartest, because they don't have to go and suffer the consequences. Someone else suffered the consequences, did the research, and wrote a book, and you, in the comfort of your home and in your own time, could read and benefit from that person's entire life experiences. And then you can also have your own experience if you're honest to think about, okay, the last time I drink, what happened, and the time before that, and the time before that. And since I've been drinking, where my life is going. Would my life be better if I stopped drinking? Right? So that for people who could read and listen and learn, they're the smartest. Then there are those people who read, listen, they don't quite believe what they read and what people tell them. They had to go and find out. And those will be the person who may relapse, because they didn't quite believe that, look, they need to go to meeting, or they need to go to meeting so many times, or they need to speak to the sponsor, or they need to keep their appointment with a therapist, or they need to stay away from people, places, and situations where drinking or drug is available. No, they didn't. They feel they strong, they could do that, and then they relapse. So, okay, now you find out. Okay, so a relapse can be used by a therapist if you do, and this is what I do when a person comes to me who relapsed. We do a post-mortem of the relapse, where you were, what was going on in your mind the weeks and days before that happened, what you were thinking, were you going to meeting, were you in touch with your sponsor, how were you taking care of yourself? All of these things comes up, and we are able to see where the relapse started, so that in the future, if you really want to stay sober, you would avoid those triggers. You would be able to see long before it happened. And this is and now there's a message here for families as well, you know, and loved ones. You often see the signs long before the addict does, because you know him. You gave birth to this boy. You know him better since he born. Or you are his elder brother or sibling, or you are his spouse. You knew him since when you all were courting. So what you need to do is to look for withdrawal signs. There are some withdrawal signs in the initial stage of recovery. Person will be irritable, they'll be angry, they be impulsive. You need to recognize these are all withdrawal symptoms that needs the attention of a professional or an experienced person. There might be mood swings, you know, which was characteristic when they were drinking as well. That is still there, even though they have stopped drinking. And then you're seeing that they're being secretive. And this is especially for people who have become addicted to pills and so on. You know, they can't explain why they need this money or where they went. They rush off to the pharmacy quick, quick, or, all of those things. You would have known the behavior. The secretive, they become very defensive. You ask them anything, they immediately they throw a tantrum, and why you asking me that, this or that. And then there's a loss of motivation. They start dropping their routines. All of these are signs that tells you that maybe, I'm saying maybe deliberately here, maybe they're heading to relapse. A lot of people in recovery would experience these things in the initial stages. It doesn't mean to say that they definitely going to relapse, but these are red flags and need for you to pay attention. And instead of being judgmental, offer them connection, engage them in conversation. You may want to say, well, boy, I notice you're pulling away these days, but I care about you. Is there any way I could help? Is there anything you want to talk to me about or anything? Love usually opens the door. Judgment closes it. I will repeat that. Love opens the door, but being judgmental, usually closes it. So, as we're getting to closing time, let me say this. As we close today's program, I want you all to remember this, that relapse is a process. Very, very rare. It happens situationally. And as I said earlier on, when it does, most of the time it's just a slip. And no big set of harm is done. It's just that the person was unaware that it had alcohol in the cake or in the drink or in the juice Or, this is Christmas time, everybody putting it in the sorrel and all kinds of things. Bitters, a lot of people don't know bitters is laced with alcohol. So that, it is a process, but that is not really the full-blown relapse. If after a slip, a person continues to drink, because a lot of times they say, well, look, you don't take one already, man. Nothing wrong now. All right, you just drink today. That means that you already relapsed in your mind long before. You were harboring the intention long before. And as I say that, this is why God has put our nose right above our mouths. So that even if somebody slip a little alcohol in our drink at some little get together or Christmas party coming up, we should smell it. And as I promised earlier on, maybe next week I will do I'll do a program on how to stay sober around Christmas time when you're in the early stages of recovery. And as I say that, I know the AA group in my community here, Felicity Serenity AA group, they have a marathon meeting this year. They will be celebrating their 27th marathon meeting. This meeting starts on Christmas morning at 8 and goes right through Christmas Day, until Boxing Day, 6 o'clock in the morning. So that people in the early stages of recovery can come to a place where they feel safe and stay sober, because a lot of people tend to relapse around the holidays because you see everybody in your house drinking, having a good time. And the same people who used to tell you don't take a drink, after they take a few drinks, they themselves will come and say, man, take one now. Because misery likes company. People who are drinking, they don't like to see somebody stay sober, it seems. So that again, I want to remind that relapse is a process. It's not an event, and it's not a failure. Definitely not a failure, but it's an opportunity for the person now to learn from that experience and so be able to avoid it in the future. It is not the end of recovery. All that the person did before and went to the meetings and learned, these are not lost. These are still there. You just need to reconnect. So it's a signal, it's a warning, it's a moment for other people around to reach out, not to condemn, not to castigate, not to come down like a ton of bricks. It's a moment for you to reach out and reconnect with them. Because, as I said, they were staying sober. They did it for a little while. And deep down in the heart of every alcoholic, they are sick and tired of being sick and tired. They don't really want to do it. It's not a moral failure. It's not that they wicked, It is just that they can't seem to help themselves. And some people have that difficulty to be honest. They have depended on telling a lie so many times that it becomes second nature. And that, as I said earlier on, if they just have the ability to be honest with themselves and others, notwithstanding if they mentally ill, they could still make this program. But honesty is critical, because the first step in recovery, the first step in the Alcoholics Anonymous program is that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our life had become unmanageable. But before one can take that step, I would like to say there are two steps before that step. And the first of those two steps is honesty. You have to be honest to realize that you cannot handle it anymore, that it is the alcohol that is causing the problem, and that nobody is causing you to drink it. It is because you are an alcoholic. And if you look back in how many times you relapse, you'll realize you can't control this. So you have to be honest. And then the second part of the first step, that's two steps before the first step, is you have to be humble. You have to be humble to become willing to seek and accept help. Then you are ready to take the first step. So honesty and humility comes before you are able to say, well, look, I admit I am powerless of alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable because of alcohol. Not because of my father, mother, spouse, colleagues, no anybody. All right. So I want you to know recovery is not about perfection. It is about awareness. It is about connection. It is about honesty. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. I want to ask you to stay mindful, stay connected, and stay committed to your recovery journey. And of course, if you need help, you can call me at 671-3040, or you could text me at 768-5925, and I'd be only too willing to help. I want to take this time to thank the staff at Radio and TV Jagriti who have been week after week since the inception of this program to be providing this service to our brothers and sisters out there. And in particular, to thank the CEO, Mr. Vijay Maharaj, who has given of his time and writes this beautiful article every week on so many various aspects of our culture and our religion, Hinduism. So I want to thank all of you, brothers and sisters, who have been listening and supporting this program, who send your comments and your words of encouragement. I want to thank you all again. And as I said, stay connected. You can access, of course, the program will be replayed at 10 p.m. tonight. It will be posted on YouTube and Facebook in a few minutes. So you can go back and review it or send it to someone who you love and who you think may be having a problem with alcohol or drugs. Because it's a disease of denial and a lot of people will not come forward. But if you send in a link to them, they will look at it in the privacy of their own home and in their own time. They may go sit in the toilet and look at it. And once the seed is planted, the information is available to them, they've seen it. The day they're ready to stop, they will stop. So thank you again. Bye for now.